Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. What is the church exactly, and what are we supposed to be doing? These are our questions. And we've been slowly and in a general way trying to build a background, build a history, because the church belongs to a long line, a long historical development. Last time we were talking about the early Christian movement, the early church, and some of its challenges. One of the biggest challenges that came upon the early church, but also upon Israel, upon Judea, was the Jewish-Roman War that erupted in 66 of the Common Era. So about 36-ish, roughly 36-ish years after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Judea revolted against the empire, and Rome responded with shock and awe. And from the years 66 to 70, there was mass destruction inflicted upon Judea and the surrounding area, so including Galilee, by Rome. Many dead Judeans was the result. In some places, whole villages would simply be slaughtered by Roman soldiers, Roman units marching through. In the year 70, the city of Jerusalem was placed under siege, and Rome took the city, set it alight, wrecked and destroyed, but left a few things standing. There were a few towers of the city still standing. A portion of the temple was still standing, but Jerusalem was unlivable for a while. Meanwhile, Judeans, descendants, inheritors of the traditions of Israel, tried to go on. Now, if you remember, the era just before this Roman-Jewish war had been a tremendously creative and fruitful period among Jews. It was fruitful and creative spiritually and theologically, and Jesus and his movement was part of that. Now, in this assault from Rome, options began to be narrowed down. A second revolt takes place in the year 132. And at that point, Rome marched in and dealt a final crushing blow to Judea. In 135, the temple was leveled except for one wall, which was left standing. The city was completely leveled. Jesus' word came to pass that not one stone was left upon another. Everything that was flammable was burned. And Rome, as was their custom, sowed salt in the soil all around the city so nothing would grow, so no one could live in the area around Jerusalem. Jerusalem was empty. This double invasion in 66 to 70, and then 132 to 135 was shattering in a way that it's hard for us even to get a grip on, to understand. It was shattering to the consciousness of Judeans, of Jews, and Christians who are also Judeans, shattering to their consciousness. God's city and God's temple leveled, crushed, left a smoking ruin. Indeed, it wasn't enough to crush the Judeans, but the Romans also built an altar to Jupiter on the site where the altar to the mysterious God of Israel had stood. And Jupiter is the Roman version of the god that the Greeks call Zeus. So this pagan altar was built at the place where the holy altar to the living God had been built. Horrible, blasphemous, horrifying in every way. One of the results of this terrible military violence was that all of those movements and groups and leaders within Jewish life were almost all destroyed, killed, scattered out of this tragedy, this conflagration, out of the smoke, only two Jewish groups, two Jewish movements survived. One was the Pharisees. And after 130, well, really after 70, they began a period of development, a long arc of development over hundreds of years, and they became what now we would recognize as Judaism. The second Jewish group that survived was the Nazarenes, and they too embarked on a long arc of development in history, and they became what we would in a general way call Christians. So modern Jews of all types and modern Christians of all types are really siblings. Sometimes you'll hear people say that the church or that Christians are the children of Judaism. And that's not really accurate historically. It's not really true. Judaism and Christianity, in all their forms, are really siblings. And both of us are the children of the traditions of ancient Israel. Both of us are the inheritors of the traditions of ancient Israel, which we have chiefly in the literature that we call the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures, or Christians are accustomed to calling it the Old Testament, language that we really should rethink. Jews and Christians are siblings worshiping the same God. For the most part, we have the same scriptures, with the one proviso that Christians add 27 books to those scriptures. And these 27 books, we really should call the apostolic writings, but we call it by custom the New Testament. So Jews and Christians worship the same God. We have mostly the same scriptures. There are many, many things that we have in common. There's one real defining difference. There's one thing about which we, at the end of the day, can't agree. And this one thing that we can't agree on, it's the thing that makes the church, and that makes the synagogue, the synagogue. Judaism, Jewish tradition says that the proper way to read and understand the Hebrew scriptures, this ancient Hebrew literature, the traditions of ancient Israel, Judaism says the proper way to read those and to understand those is through the prism and through the interpretive tradition, the tradition of interpretation of the rabbis. Going back a long way, and we have a very, very important portion of it written down in a very, very complicated work called the Talmud. Christians hold that the lens through which we have to read and understand the Hebrew writings, the Bible, is Jesus. We have to read and understand and interpret in relation to Jesus, through the things that Jesus said and did, having some care to notice how Jesus interprets the Hebrew writings, and centrally through the lens of Jesus' innocent suffering and death at the hands of the Romans and his resurrection. We could say that in summary that the fundamental difference between the synagogue and the church is this interpretive decision. Synagogue says you read the Hebrew scriptures in light of the tradition of the rabbis' interpretation, and Christians say it's Jesus. It's all about Jesus. Thank you for being with me today. We will continue next week.